Cool. All right. Well, we're here with John and Joe, illustrious game designers from Fantasy Flight. I'm looking at the iPad and not the camera. I should be looking
Yeah.
at the camera. Uh, but yeah, you guys are the lead designers for set 5. Here with Jay. We're
Yep.
unplayable if I didn't say that. I'm bad at this, but we're gonna continue on
You're
anyway.
doing great. Yeah, you're
I've got some questions,
Yeah.
and we'll kick it off with some questions, and we'll just have a nice casual conversation. The first thing I want to talk about was you guys came in like after set 5 had already started. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. It was in pretty early development, and Aaron Haltom, who's now on Marvel Champions, was the Kickstarter of Set 5. So he made that like really basic skeleton, but it looked very different than the final product we have now, which is normal for sets through development.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we sort of walked in and inherited essentially a rough draft.
Yeah.
And so it was up to us to take that rough draft, keep what was working, develop it, enhance it, and come up with something polished.
Nice. Can you like go a little bit deeper on like what was working and like
Absolutely.
maybe yeah, I don't know. I think
What
people
you
will be
guys
interested in
might have cut.
that. Yeah.
You said what was working, and the first thing that came to mind was Ogdo Bogdo.
Yeah.
That card went through one change throughout the entire development. It used to be aggression, and now it's vigilance.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's it. Text
Nice.
boxes and stats are all the same.
So a fun little fact, as we develop the set and we iterate, and for Legends of the Force, we pushed a new update like once a week, for the entire life cycle of the set essentially. And when we do that, when we change a card, we update its version number to whatever is the most recent version of the set. And Ogdo Bogdo stayed version 1, I think, through the entire development of the set.
Yeah.
So we go through like this meeting called Design Summit, where all the designers get together, talk about every card, balance them. We're going to get together and talk about, and these are like giant moments of change.
Yeah.
Where a ton of cards change at once. And Ogdo Bogdo was just like weathering the storm. Just a rock in a river, unchanging.
Strong card, very clear hoop you got to jump through. It just played really well for everyone.
Yeah.
So.
And thematically, it's so cool because he doesn't attack you until you've attacked him.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In a
Oh
video
yeah, in the
game.
game. That's true.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. That's awesome.
Props to Aaron for that.
Yeah.
Absolute slam dunk.
That
of
one
the
was an
design.
Aaron original. so-
Version 1 all the way
Yeah.
down.
That's great. So it was intended that the video game stuff would be in the set before you guys hopped on.
Yep. So a lot of like the character choices were already set in stone. We couldn't
Mhm.
change. Like art was coming in, so commissioning that is part of the process.
Mm.
What we changed up a lot of was just like the mechanics and like the individual cards, like how the force worked, what triggered it, what payoffs there were, and most of that.
One thing that people don't really know about designing a TCG or really any game is that art is actually one of the very first things you have to do, especially with a game like this where you're commissioning,
So many
multiple
pieces
hundreds of pieces of
Yeah.
art, which means that the ideas for the cards have to be set really, really early. We do, get a couple of extra pieces for flexibility, but those character choices have to be locked
Mhm.
very, very early in a set's design. So I don't know, just a bit of trivia.
Yeah. And it does sometimes present interesting challenges where you're like, oh, I want this design to do this now.
Mhm.
And maybe that design has more of like a calm healing effect, but then the art ends up being like a really angry character. And you're like, okay, let's switch these art pieces up a little bit and make it make more sense.
Absolutely. It becomes a bit of a juggling act
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
of putting the right thing, puzzling the right ability onto the right piece of art.
That's cool. Yeah, that sounds like a fun piece of the puzzle there.
It's really fun and
Yeah.
really thrilling
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Do you ever like leave designs kind of simple until you see the art and then try and design to the art? Like is that ever something to think about?
Not super specific just for the timeline. It's pretty important to like have something, but we have pivoted for sure before. My favorite pivot, and it was really minor, was Curious Flock used to say pay up to 5 resources, and then the art came in and it had 7 ports. So really make it 6.
That's
Yeah.
So that it can be a 7/7. right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's 7 porgs, 7 stats on HP and power. So
That's awesome.
So little tweaks like that are fun. And
Mhm.
like, let's say there's like 2 clone troopers in the art. Well, okay, let's make it a 4/4. That sort of thing.
like make the cost make sense to make it match. And,
That's really
yeah.
cool.
That's awesome. I was gonna ask a little bit more about art. Do you guys ever like reject or like get an art piece and you're like, this isn't what we wanted, or I don't like the way this looks, and either send it back to the artist, or is that more like the art team that
lucky for us, that's
Mhm.
pretty much the art department's
Yeah.
thing. We have great art directors in the studio, and they're in charge of interfacing with that. Sometimes we'll have notes on like, if something doesn't look right or whatever. But
And sometimes we've had to add art to a slush section
Mm.
where we just save it for later and we could potentially use it in a different set. And that has come to save us in some times where like, oh, we really want like a unique character to take this slot, but we had to cut a different one.
Mhm.
And then we can look at who we have available and we're like, oh, this is the perfect fit. And it's always
Yeah.
really satisfying when that happens.
Cool.
Nice. That's awesome. Uh, so you guys worked together on this set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did that work? Like, what were your roles on it? Did you guys, share responsibilities?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm
What's it
I'm
like
happy
working
to
Take it.
I love working with Joe. So
Please keep talking.
yeah, I love working with Joe. He's nice, handsome. So for Legends of the Force, when we rolled onto it, I was already starting development on set 7. Like set 7 was a set that I pitched, cradle to grave.
Mhm.
And so when we moved on to Legends of the Force, I was also deep in the R&D on that. And so the sort of natural result of what happened
Mhm.
was that Joe took a really big share of the leadership on Legends of the Force. And so essentially when I finished my rough draft of set 7, Joe was already working really closely hand in hand with Aaron.
Mhm.
And so when I got to move on, I felt like I got to step into sort of like a sidekick role for Joe. I referred to myself constantly throughout development as his Sancho Panza. Like, I'm here to help with the design work,
Mhm.
of course, be an extra set of hands, run playtests, but basically to be like the number 2. If Joe's the superstar of the set, which I think he is, then
Aw.
I'm like very comfortable being like, you know, I was not the visionary of Legends of the Force. I didn't pitch it. I didn't pick most of the characters, but I got to come on and bring my perspective.
Mhm.
And essentially my job was to be a helper and help Joe deliver the best possible product.
Sam. I effectively became the design lead there and kind of took it in a direction from where Aaron had it to something more in line with our game vision as we had more ongoing conversations about how we want the game to be acting, behaving in terms of
Mhm.
like um, power levels and complexity for new players and experienced advanced players. Make sure it appeals to both of those sides. And
Right.
that's how we ended up in the force mechanic that we have and know now. Um, and John was really good at helping to identify some of those weaknesses and then executing on the vision that we had together. And
Yeah.
yeah.
What were some of the other forced mechanics that you guys tried before you settled on this?
We tried so many.
Yeah. A lot of them were different triggers and a lot of them were different um payoffs. And I can talk a little bit about some of those. Like we wanted when playeds to be the major way of using the force because one, it's usually attached to a character and unique characters that everyone loves and knows from the movies, shows, games, etc. are what is most fun to play with in the game. Um, in this game, when played is very important because tempo is so important. And if you play a unit and it just doesn't get to do anything, it gets removed immediately, then that doesn't feel as good. And we want the force to have an impact in the game. With its when played, that means that the trigger to gain the force has to be not when played, or else it's pretty redundant. So then it ended up being attacking. So then you have that payoff with the early units, and then or you have that setup with early units, payoff with the later units or mid range units. So we played with all the different versions of gaining and losing that way. And a lot of the versions that we liked but weren't quite executing on that vision kind of ended up into the rare bases. So, like controlling a force unit with 4 HP became just control a unit with 4 HP, which became Virgin's Temple. So,
Mhm. Yeah, it was fun to have the rare bases as like a repository for other good ideas.
yeah,
That we felt like, oh, these are promising, and that's a way for us to let players have more of a sandbox
yeah.
experience with the Force.
How did you come to the decision of kind of locking the force mechanic behind the bases?
It was a really long iterative process.
Yeah, we had a few different versions that started with base and then took it away from base, and then it became a like gain and spend throughout just the card pool, but that ate up too much of the card pool, and it felt like, oh, I didn't draw the one card that gains me the force, so now I don't get to use it. And we want to make sure usability was so important for this. So then tying that to the base felt one really good for like you will always have a way to gain it as long as you have force units, and there will always be force units in this game. They're from set one and forever, we're always going to have at least some. Um, and another interesting side effect of that that was really impactful for gameplay was you can opt into these like really strong decks that use a lot of really powerful effects if you use one of those bases, but it does lock you out of other strong bases like Energy Conversion Lab and Data Vault or Tarkin Town, and it means it's going to be forcing a choice on you. Like you don't just get to run all of the best cards together. You have to choose like, oh, do I want this force package or do I want that Tarkin Town? And I'm curious to see how that goes in the wild. Maybe there is a version of Quinlan Boss that likes to run a force base and not just Tarkin Town. And that'll play meaningfully different too. It also lets us balance those cards and is like, oh, this would be too good with Tarkin Town, but we don't have to worry about that
Right.
as much.
Yeah.
One thing that came up in a lot of our conversations about where does the force mechanic live? How does it work? I think this was a question asked by Danny, our lead designer. And we always bring this conversation to like what's special about Star Wars Unlimited. And one of the things that's really like notable about our game is that we have the base system. A lot of other games don't have that. And so by anchoring it not on like the force trait on your units or something, this is something that you can opt into with a very simple choice that you make at the start of deck building. And I think that makes it a lot more of a clear opt-in, opt-out choice for people.
Totally.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that, like the base is the thing that's always in play. And so tying it to that means like you always have access to the mechanic that you're building your deck around. Like that makes a ton of sense to me now.
It also did help with new players where it's like, oh, how does this work again? You can just read it right there.
Yeah. You don't have to have a reference card or anything like that. For sure.
You guys said you inherited this set from a previous designer, but from what you're saying, it sounds like you guys designed the force mechanic pretty much like in its current iteration.
Yeah, it was a team effort for sure. We had a lot of key input from people like MJ Cuts, who like was sort of was there for one of the big eureka moments.
Yeah. Well, it was an offhand comment, and I had to go dig through teams to find it again. But it was just like, what if the force was a binary? And then the next day, I brought in demo decks trying this version of the force, and it played really, really well. So then you, me, and Aaron all decided let's lean into that and make that what the set is about.
I feel like it was you and Aaron playing, and I was just watching.
Oh, maybe.
and like the first game, and I remember having this really distinct moment where I was like, oh, like this is it.
Yeah.
Like we are really, really close here.
Nice. What was it before? It was like
You say it was,
either on or
he
off.
said binary, but so that means it must have not been binary.
Yeah, so we can talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
But there was a version that played with the force as sort of a secondary resource. Like there's a force token and you put little counters on it, and this is how much force you have. And then you expend some number of force to do this effect.
And it was fine, but it took a lot of what felt like accounting. Where I'm just like, I'm already managing resources. I don't really want to do the mental math of managing more resources.
Sure.
It made something that's all important to Star Wars, right? The Force, and it made it feel like a pile of jelly beans. That are like you're moving on and off of a card, and we were like, this doesn't feel quite right. It wasn't really. It didn't feel like you're doing the cool.
The like ebb and flow felt a lot more impactful and like more thematic.
So having the Force be a binary meant that we knew exactly more or less how much the force is worth in terms of costing and ability, and it let us make some really, really cool effects.
The force is obviously one of, if not the most Star Warsy thing ever. Like, was there extra pressure that you guys felt to design the mechanic because of how just big the force is within Star Wars and people's expectation of what that means in the game?
Yeah, for sure. Like,
Absolutely.
A big thing that I kept saying throughout is like it has to feel impactful. Like if we're using the phrase "use the force," it can't feel like you're doing nothing with it, or like was that even worth using the force? No, it should be something that feels impactful.
People bring their expectations to everything,
Mhm.
right? And so for us, at least for me, it
Mhm.
was not so much scary as really exciting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because what we wanted to do was make something that's going to intrigue and surprise people and make them want to dig in and interact with
Mhm.
it. Um, and I feel like we did a really good job, honestly.
I do too.
Pat ourselves on the back.
Nice.
So all the video game stuff,
Mhm.
all the Legends stuff, the Knights of the Old Republic stuff, the High Republic stuff, how much research do you guys have to do in order to like be on top of knowing who all these characters are and figuring out how to design cool thematic mechanics around them? Like, do you guys play Knights of the Old Republic like while you were designing this set?
I did a little bit actually. Like I had never played as a kid,
Mhm.
and I didn't have that attachment from like my childhood. But I know Revan's a fan favorite,
Mhm.
and around the office, both Tyler and MJ were big fans. So I consulted them a lot while making these cards and making sure they felt thematic, making sure that they felt like the characters. Um, but like you can't absorb every single piece of media, especially in a set like with this, where it pulls from so many different sources.
Yeah.
And that's where we kind of rely on each other in the team, where it's like, oh, Fallen Order and Survivor, like some of my favorite games. So for me, that was really easy to dive in and make sure that it like a felt true to the character.
Right.
But like for other media, you go, hey, I know you're a fan of this particular one.
Right.
What do you think of it? So
Tyler is notably the High Republic fan.
Yeah.
And so like if you're like, okay, we've got this character, or we've got this design, can you find us a High Republic character that's gonna like get us there?
Mhm.
And everyone on the team has their different backgrounds and different strengths. Is gonna be able to bring something different.
That's awesome. What are each of your strengths, would you say? Like, what's your, I mean, you
Mm.
mentioned Fallen Order,
Yeah,
Jedi Survivor.
We're both real
Amazing
sickos for
games.
the Jedi
Yeah.
Fallen Order
They're so
series.
good.
Yeah.
I love those games so much. And like, of course, I've seen all the movies, but like, yeah, grew up and attached to the prequels, so those were pretty easy to dive into any content from those.
Mhm.
Yeah. I like a lot of the old like Legends novels. I grew up reading a lot of that stuff. And generally just I guess I'm considered more of a generalist. I know like a
Mhm.
little bit of everything and then
Mhm.
can go pretty deep on like the Andor and the other live action series and stuff.
So another big thing about this set, not just force, but we are changing kind of like the base stats for I guess everything. We've
sure.
shifted over
Oh,
to like
yes,
two
yes.
4
I think
as
the
it's like
stats
the
on
two
the base.
costs. No, not the base. And then Gungee obviously, and he's a 2/5, which is like super high stats, like 7 for 2. That's a lot.
Mhm.
What were kind of your bullet point goals that you were looking to achieve by doing that? And did you guys make that decision, or was it part of the rough draft already when you got it?
That one was mostly me actually.
Yeah, that was big on Joe.
Yeah. So like having your early game units just get blown up instantly. I mean, of course, a 4 HP unit can still be defeated by Tarkin Town, but it does require the use of that, and then maybe play another one, and then they have to work harder to get that second one out of play. Durability for early units felt like it made the game a lot more fun, and you like actually got to use the cards that you wanted, um, or use your favorite cards. We looked at a lot of the old sets and the most played units around that cost, and a lot of them are those 3/3s. So like Sabine Wren from Spark of Rebellion is a 2/3, but if you squint her on attack gives her an extra power. Battlefield Marine, all of those. If you just shift the stats up 1 HP and down 1 power, you kind of land there anyway. And a lot of the way we balance a lot of these cards is based on how restrictive the deck building is for them. More aspects means they go into fewer decks. Unique means you only get one of them on the board. You don't get to flood the board with Gungees. You do get to flood the board with Battlefield Marines. So all of those restrictions let us give those cards a little bit more power. And we were debating the 2/4 a lot, where it's like this feels very big compared to a lot of our other units, but the stat lines aren't that different from the past. And also, the Twilight of the Republic R2D2
Mhm.
had existed already for multiple sets of testing and had been playing well. It's a
Didn't ruin the game,
no, it's a
surprisingly.
it's a good card. It doesn't take over the game. It has a nice ability, just 2/4 with upside, and that kind of became the basis for that cycle of cards in Legends of the Force. Yellow or Cunning Heroism is the one color that doesn't get a 2-cost 2/4. They will in the future, I will say that much.
Oh, yeah.
But for this set, they already have one. All the other colors get to join in on the fun. And then, yeah, Gungee is a 2/4 with an ability, and that ability is +1 HP.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did you have to change any of these, I don't know, stat templates, I guess, for cards like higher than 2 cost, or was it mostly the 2 cost cards?
2 cost was what was most important to me, but there's we chase that up the curve a little bit. And you can see that in the Obi-Wan Kenobi unit as a 3/5 with conditional sentinel. The Ezra unit that is a 3/5 that gives out experience on attack. So we've talked a lot about like where on the curve is this okay, where is it not, and every set's going to do it a little differently because every set is going to move the ship towards aggro, towards control, towards mid range slightly. It can't just always be in a straight line, or else the game will feel flat. And for me in this set, I wanted it to feel a little bit more mid rangey and have those early units stick around for a little bit longer.
You mentioned I don't remember what one of the creatures. But Ezra, you mentioned Ezra.
Oh yeah.
How did the creature sub theme sort of make it into the set? Was that a thing that was already planned, or did you guys bring that in?
That was one of Aaron's darlings, and
Mhm.
we kept that throughout. And the Ezra Kanan package together, like caring about creatures is fun, but creatures are also all non-unique units for the most part. Um, and to play with your favorite characters is a big thing. So to batch that with the Spectres felt instantly thematic and makes a really fun deck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other thing is that when putting together like a set skeleton, right, or working on a pitch for a set, it's important to think about the fans who are not that into the central theme of the set.
Yes.
So there's a ton of people who like they love Star Wars, but because of the funky critters and not because
Mhm.
of the Jedi and the Sith and
Mhm.
the Night Sisters and stuff. And so with every set, we try to make sure that there's
Mhm.
prominent sub themes that are going to be exciting to other people too. Shadows of the Galaxy, for example, we had some sequel trilogy stuff. Rey and Kylo have a nice presence in the set, stuff like that.
Nice.
And even if it's not like a major sub theme, maybe you just want like a few strong new cards for your deck. So your Underworld deck now has Aura Sing, or if you're running Raid, you get March and Row.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
What was the most exciting part about working on the set? Like what part do you look back on and you're like, man, this was fun to design?
When the force mechanic like clicked was like the biggest moment. We're like, oh, we're on to something, and this feels really special. Um, and it is an archetype that is still going through our internal testing, like through post rotation, where it's like, oh, are you running a force deck or are you running a different kind of deck? Um, and to see that it still functions well after Legends of the Force is really nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
How does it, because so like eventually this set will rotate out. How does like ever adding a card later that's like use the force, is that even something that's possible if this set ends up rotating out and then like you put, I don't know, set 10, there's a like, I know that wouldn't happen probably, but like how does that influence set design like later? Are you ever going to be able to put more use the force cards, or will the force be something completely different later down the line?
This is something that we're actively having a conversation about now.
Yeah.
Like I'm working on set 10 right now. And I think that we're open to bringing back the force mechanic in its current implementation. And there's also a very good chance that we bring it back and it's going to look and feel a little different.
Yeah.
I can't wait for you guys to find out.
Yeah. No, I wish I could tell you anything about that far down the line because there's a lot of exciting stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it might look different. It might look the same, and we will see because we like all those possibilities. So
Yeah.
How hard is it to balance the different payoffs for using the force? So like in one example, using the force might give like -1/-1, but
Mhm.
then another example it might be like -3/-3.
Yeah.
Like, how did you guys go about being able to balance that, and like the different ways you can get the force? Because like, if you're using the new green rare base, you can just like tap it and you get the force, and then other cases you have to attack with the unit. Like, how does all of that go? Like, how hard is it to balance all that?
It was hard. That was one of the biggest challenges throughout development is making sure that it never felt over impactful, but it still did feel impactful. It's such an economy within the set of gain and spend, making sure that both of those feel right. Because if you have too many gains, then it feels like I have nothing to do with this. And if you have too many spends and not enough gains, it's just like, oh, I wish I could play
Right.
with this mechanic. Um, so a lot of this was through experimentation, and a lot of this was through kind of making rules for ourselves where especially early force is equal to maybe like roughly one resource or like 0.75 resource like um and then as you go up the curve, those abilities do get a little bit more impactful. And you can see that in the Night Sisters, I think, where Karis -2/-2 is really good in the early game, but it's on a when defeated, so you don't get to immediately use it. You go up 2 points in the curve, and now you're at 4. You do get it immediately, you get it a little bit stronger.
Mm.
So those two abilities are not both equal to one resource.
Right.
But because you're sinking more into the playing of the card, you get to make that a little bit more impactful. And you'll see that as we get up the curve to like 6 and 8 cost units, there's some really cool abilities on those ones.
Yeah, if you think of it like your leader is essentially a 0 cost card that you start with the game with and play, then Mother Talzin is like,
Mhm.
relatively easy to balance, right?
Right.
And just like Joe's saying, and then as you move up the curve, we can also balance things, units and cards holistically, right? So let's say a unit is more expensive,
Mhm.
pricey. We can give it a really hugely impactful force
Mhm.
ability and lower stats. Or we can give it huge stats and you can opt into that force ability if you want to. So there are more knobs than you would think.
Mhm.
I want to get maybe a little bit more specific. Well, before I do that, another mechanic that we haven't talked about yet that is new to the set is
Oh, sure.
hidden. Like, how did that come about? Like, was that something that I think I heard you, Joe, say in one of the streams that it can help you turn on the force because it makes it easier for your units to attack. But it's a evergreen keyword, right? So it's going to be on cards into the future. Like, yeah, just to talk about the mechanic and like why it's something that's going to keep continuing to be designed on cards.
Yeah. Again, more of that early game durability or even later game durability. It lets your finisher stay alive to actually get that swing on base, maybe and end the game. Um, so it played really well in that regard, and it did make it feel like you might get to stick around a little bit more, which isn't important. And it played really well naturally into the force mechanic. So this felt like a really good place to introduce that. And because it was such a nice, like, straightforward survivability keyword that we could put onto space units, we could put onto force units, we could put onto creatures, um, it felt natural to make it evergreen. And it gives a lot of units like that little buff that they need in order to make the impact on the next turn.
One thing we don't talk about a lot, and maybe not even enough,
Mhm.
is when we're talking about introducing an evergreen keyword. Evergreen, for those who might not know, it means a keyword or piece of rules text or whatever that can appear in every single set.
Mhm.
So like Saboteur, Overwhelm, etc. Um, One thing that's really important when introducing a keyword that we intend to be evergreen is that it needs to be thematically agnostic. Something that's going to be able to apply in a ton of different contexts. So, for example, um, because it's called hidden, well, anything can be hidden. A
Right.
spaceship can be hidden, a creature can be hidden, a Jedi can be in hiding. Um, if the keyword was called something completely different,
Force conceal
Yeah.
or
yes,
yeah.
yes, disguised.
Yeah.
Well, ships can be disguised, but it's a little bit harder to wrap your head around.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can a creature be disguised? Well, maybe if it's got camouflage, I don't know.
Kinda, yeah.
And so it's important to think about what are the contexts in which in which we would actually use this word, Does it feel right? There's keywords like bounty, for example, that are popular keywords in a previous set. But that keyword, fortunately or unfortunately, isn't going to apply in every context that we wish it would. And so that's one of the important things to consider when bringing in a new keyword.
Nice. Okay, the more specific questions that I wanted to ask. We have the first two single aspect leaders in the set with Anakin and Darth Revan, of course. What was it like designing those? Where did you start kind of iterating on that? Like, how did that enter the game, I guess? Like, yeah.
So Anakin, it felt like being single aspect was pretty natural because he gets to play with all the aspects using his ability. So for him, it just felt like he's basically a rainbow leader anyway. And you can choose your base to like get your basic units, but otherwise you're going to be playing all those cards. It doesn't matter as much.
Sure.
Revan was a balancing lever that felt really thematic because we wanted to lean into Sith a lot with him. And the Sith typal units in the set, a lot of them are in monovillain to help aid him between Malik, Tyrannus, the Scimitar. He can run those in any of his decks, his own lightsabers, of course. The Revan play pattern was something that was really fun in testing, but could run away with games and snowball. Naturally, your units are going to want to attack other units, especially when they have the power to defeat them. That's usually how the game works, is just you do a win plate, and then whatever's on board might try to clear the opponent's board. But now your board is just even bigger and bigger and bigger. So we wanted to keep that play pattern because it was really satisfying and really fun. But to print it with the both aspects felt a little too strong. And this let you lean into the fun factor while also making every different color of Revan feel very, very unique. And that was a really, really fun side effect where blue Revan plays a lot with like shrink and making the opponents really small. So now you can defeat them pretty easily. Whereas green Revan plays really well with energy conversion lab or other ambushes. And yellow Revan really likes shoot first style effects. And red likes to ping. And they all play really unique and really strongly, but having those different flavors felt like four different leaders in a really cool way. So we wanted to keep those impactful abilities while having the different flavors of Revan.
That's
I think
awesome.
What's kind of cool about designing for this game is that when you add a restriction, it forces creative thinking, right, and creative deck building. And I am a player who loves to have a lot of options. If I could play a 3 or 4 aspect deck, I probably would like to. But being forced to play 1 or 2 aspects, with just the villainy aspect, it makes you approach your deck building from a new way. And that's an exciting challenge, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the theme of Revan that someone pointed out to me and I didn't catch on at first, but it's like, because it's an RPG, when you defeat stuff, you get experience.
Yeah,
sure,
I didn't catch that either.
Sure, yeah, it's cool, like to convert like your little victories into long-term gain.
Yeah.
Is very, very a cool effect, I think.
He started off as dual aspect? Is that true or no?
We've tried different versions of aspects with Revan.
Okay.
And yeah, he went through a few different iterations, and I don't know how much I can actually get into on that side
Sure,
because we
sure.
might save some of that for the future. Who knows? And I want to keep some of that in our back pocket.
Sure.
But I will say there was like grit used to be built into Revan himself.
Oh wow.
Oh, true.
And not on his lightsaber.
Yeah, and that felt so strong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
grit's such a funky word, but it's so
yeah.
it's so good.
and when you're naturally like damaging yourself just by attacking enemy units, you can just snowball even harder. So that was another balancing lever where it's like he's already single aspect and he's already crushing games. Like, how do we make that feel a little bit better? And it's like, let's make you work for that grit and put it on the lightsabers there.
There's the fun upside too of the lightsabers work on anything that's a Sith,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So grit is not an easy keyword to get in this game if you don't have it naturally. So I think that was that's like a fun tool that will probably be reappearing.
It's one of my favorite cards in the set.
Yeah.
That plus the Sith with Holocron together, like
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love the theme there, and I mean, yeah, put that on a unit and ready it a bunch of times. That's my kind of
This is
Star
oh,
Wars
yeah.
Unlimited.
First time you can run a mostly like Sith deck, and
Absolutely.
we wanted it to feel really like powerful. So yeah,
Nice.
for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how did you guys land on the 25 health for all the bases? Like how hard is that to balance and design around? And like, did you know that they were all going to be 25 health before you, or the rare ones? Did you know that they were going to be 25 health before you designed the abilities, or did you design the abilities and then you looked at all of them and you're like, yeah, I think five health is right for all these?
More the latter. I
Yeah,
would say.
yeah. We tried different health numbers, just like what feels right, what feels most balanced, but um all of them felt strong and open enough. Whereas the force common bases are so restrictive, like you're probably gonna be running mostly force units. Then we wanted the mechanic to be at its base form really accessible. And missing 5 health is pretty scary. Missing 2 is not as scary. Um, so 25 felt like the right space for all of them. So then to make it unilateral made the most sense.
That said, calibrating base health is one of the hardest parts about balancing
Oh,
in
yeah.
this
Very
game.
hard.
It's very, very difficult. And it, they're not all bangers. Unfortunately, sometimes you're gonna miss by like a number or two.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of like
Yeah.
there's not an amount of playtesting
No.
that
It's so complex.
makes it feel like every base health is exactly right.
Yeah.
And there's also the question of like shorthanding. If you have an increment of 5, it's a lot easier for players to keep track.
Yes.
Which is like a very small thing, but it's a quality of life thing. Having all the bases have the same amount of health across a cycle, very meaningful for the new player experience specifically, and that's something that entrenched players don't think much about because they haven't been new players for over a year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a lot of factors that go into it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that the hardest thing to design? Is a rare base?
It's hard. I've designed a lot of rare bases now, and it's very challenging.
The fact that it's always in play is really significant. I think everyone has their like strengths and weaknesses on what they like to design. So
What's each of your favorite thing to design?
Events.
Events.
I love events. I'm a
events
real-
is my least favorite, so
Yeah.
we work well
Yeah, that's
together.
There were many meetings where we'd be like sitting and looking over our tasks for the week, and Joe would be like, "I've got like 4 events. Can you do these?"
No, I love just the unique units. Like you get a flavor that you can build off of, and you can decide to go top down or bottom up. Top down usually means approaching from the theme. Bottom up means approaching with the mechanics. And I find those really fun to mix them together. Where I'm just like, I've got this great idea for a mechanic. How do I make it feel like that character?
That's one of the most rewarding things you can do in
Yeah.
designing for this game, is like finding the perfect meld of theme and mechanics.
Yeah.
We've mentioned a lot of cards that do fit that mold already. Like what are some that rise to the top of your mind when you think about that for Set 5? I mean, like I don't remember if we were recording when we talked about this, but Ogdo Bogdo.
Yeah.
Ogdo Bogdo's great.
Great example. Oh, who else?
If Leia Organa.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I love that card so much. And in the right deck, she can be really strong. So like it started from a kind of theme first approach there. We knew we wanted. Well, Aaron had a different version that worked not with the Space Arena. And I'm like, we got to play into this if this is the art.
Yeah.
And being able to start there and then move down and get the board, like Leia's here, she's safe, and she's making all your hero units like bolstered.
Yeah.
It all came together really, really nicely.
Absolutely.
Does anything come to your mind, John?
Oh gosh. It's hard not to love HK47. Exclamation die meat bag.
Yeah.
It's just like he's like good stats for his cost. He's got the Sith trait, which is
Yeah, I
so
love that.
exciting
Yeah.
on a non-force user.
Yeah.
Just because of his affiliation to Darth Revan and so on. And the fact that it feels like he's just flinging blaster bolts all over the place. I just love that interpretation of the character. I think he's a lot of fun.
That's great.
When you can do it in one line of text, it's really nice.
Yes.
That's the best, because in Star Wars Unlimited, we don't usually have like super chunky text boxes,
Which I love.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's one of the more exciting challenges is like, how can we do a really cool ability with few lines of text?
Mhm.
You know, sometimes it takes a lot, like Qui-Gon Jinn, for example.
Yeah,
Um,
giant text box.
But luckily, that's on your leader, and you can kind of shorthand it
Mhm.
once you know how the card works.
Yeah.
But for like Ogdo Bogdo, for example, you know, it's like what, 2 lines of text or
Yeah.
something, maybe 3. It's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an exciting challenge.
Do you feel like it being Star Wars makes it a little bit easier when you're designing? Because I feel like if you're designing something like Magic, you have to create a character and then also create what their identity is. Do you feel like being able to sit down, because you guys designed the theme first, right, of the set? You guys choose like what are the themes of the set?
We'll think of base mechanics too, but
Probably,
that
yeah.
can change a little bit.
Yeah, in the pitches that I've done, it's usually I'm gonna pitch a theme and a mechanic that goes with it.
Okay.
So I think it depends.
Um, I think it both makes it easier and harder in different ways. One, you have something existing to latch onto, which is great. You can try to like match that theme, but Star Wars is for everyone, and everyone has different expectations of what that character is going to be doing. So for some of the audience, it might feel like, yeah, that's a perfect match. And for other people, it might be like, oh, I was expecting them to do this instead. And like, you're never going to hit 100% of those expectations. So it's just about making sure that everyone has something that they can enjoy in each set.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. There's just got its own challenges.
Yeah. The expectation of tens of thousands of fans is a very serious factor, you
Mhm.
know, and we want to satisfy people and give them what they want. And there is a very serious truth that sometimes people don't know what they don't know about, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, can we provide them an experience that is different from what they expected
Mhm.
and is going to be rewarding and an excellent experience anyway? And that's like a pretty real cognitive like gap to bridge.
Cool. So, I mean, Avar Chris, very unique
Yeah.
leader. How did that design
Mhm.
happen? Like, was she always going to want you to use the force as many times as possible, try and get her out as early as possible? Like,
No.
when did that mini game sort of pop up?
That one was for me. When we landed on the force mechanic, um, it became kind of a fun challenge for me to like jam as many force uses in a deck as possible. I'm like engaging with this new mechanic. I want to test it at its limits, and that became a fun mini game to play. Um, so that mini game became part of Avar's design, and originally it was the only way to deploy her. And that felt like, oh, if I'm getting bullied out of the force or I'm losing the game a little bit, I'm just never going to get it. And it felt really bad. So then we landed on that inevitability design where it's like, if I hit 9, she's coming. But otherwise, you can reduce that number because 9 is a really hard resource count to get to. Um, and it's been one of my favorite leaders to play because one, the front side immediately makes you thinking like, oh, I could play this with Colossus. I don't need the force base. I could just use this ability otherwise, but then you do lose out on probably getting the multiple procs in a turn.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there's that natural tension of do I want to use mostly the one or both sides? And then two, the mini game of like how can I get this many force procs in one turn? And I've already seen people talking about like, oh, like if you do this and line this up, you can get her out at the 5 resource turn. And people trying to like plan the deck about the earliest deploy possible. And that's exactly the kind of player she's intended for, is like a fun combo player that you get a really big reward.
She's huge
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
she enters.
Most
Biggest
stats
stats
for
on
any
the
leader, yeah.
yeah.
Assuming you have the force active, right? She's
Yes.
by
And
far
if
the
you
biggest.
have a normal
She's still
space,
big if
She's
you
still-
don't have
yeah,
the
good
force.
stats,
But
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
put a general's blade on her and like,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, go to town.
But no, if you have a normal force base, you'll get that as soon as she attacks anyway. So that was part of the design too, is like if you've spent your whole turn trying to get this force, like you've earned it.
You deserve to smack your opponent in the face for 8 damage.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of your other like favorite cards that you designed in this set?
I always go to Gungee.
We love Gungee. Gungee is
What's your Gungee love? Like where does that come from?
I think it's because it kind of fit the design philosophy that I was pushing for a lot of the early durable units. He does so much with so few words, literally 0 words in the text box. The trait synergies are really strong. He gets to stick around, but he's not too aggressive because his power's not that big. It felt thematic because Wookiees get big HP, but also he's a youngling, so he is small in that regard. And I'm always a sucker for upgrade decks, and putting a lightsaber on Gungee will never not be satisfying.
Oh yeah, Gungee General's Blade.
Yeah.
He's like the best lightsaber platform
Yeah.
on turn 2 or turn 1 that you can play.
You better have a Power of the Dark Side because
Yeah.
Gungee's swinging.
No. Power of the Dark Side or Waylay. I'm just
Yeah.
like, every time I have the General's Blade in my hand on turn 2, I'm like, do I do this?
It's a real choice,
It's so
yeah.
risky. Like,
I don't know if it was intended, but the fact that he's such a good lightsaber platform, like, it's so thematic where it's like, okay, he found his lightsaber,
Yes,
Chris.
of
Yeah.
course.
Like, he's gonna start smacking people now.
Because
the
his
prestige-
main storyline is making his lightsaber.
Yeah, in the Clone Wars.
Yeah. And Prestige Art, you actually get to see that lightsaber
Oh,
in
that's
there,
so
which is
Yeah,
pretty
it's
fun.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's a good piece of art too.
Yeah.
Did you love Gungee before the card, or
Actually, no, I didn't know the character that well
Yeah.
before, but like, yeah, I
Now you've got a Gungee tattoo on your back.
oh, I wish. Yeah.
We were literally talking about getting Gungee. One thing that I think is really special and important to understand about the Gungee experience, so to speak, is that Joe and Danny and I, and then the rest of the team at large, we had this philosophical drive to push the game toward mid-range,
Mhm.
and we knew that this was going to involve changing the stats on 2-drop units, and that theoretically a 2/5 for 2 should work if
Mhm.
it's unique. And so this became sort of like, you could say like a flashpoint, right? Like, it really pushed against the expectations of our playtest group. And it became something that we really needed to make sure it was sort of like the test case for this philosophical change. If Gungee works, then this philosophy works.
Yes. Yeah.
If the Gungee doesn't work, then this philosophy doesn't work.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
She became the poster child for like that stat line.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the poster child ultimately for this metagame shift and this shift in design philosophy that ultimately, like we've continued pursuing from there.
Nice. Do you have an answer for like your favorite card that you designed, or something that was super exciting, or?
Oh yeah, I mean there's so many cards in the set that I really love. It's for me, it's always hard to remember which cards I designed, because usually the best designs come out of like having a chat with someone and being like, "What if it did this?" And I always forget who said it. Maybe it's never me. I don't know. But like there were a lot of cards that I had a hand in that I'm really proud of. Like, for example, Shatterpoint is sort of like we expect to be one of the premier removal cards in the set.
Shatterpoint was not a conversation. That was a John card.
That was a me card for
Yeah,
sure. Because we were like, well, we need a piece of removal for this.
Yeah.
For the
You already mentioned you love designing events.
absolutely.
and playing control?
And I'm a control player, and I was like, what is the force equivalent of takedown, basically? Non-leader, eventually. And yeah, and that was a card that I really advocated for, and I think is a really strong card, but ultimately relatively healthy.
Yeah. You have to opt into the package in order to use it.
For
So,
sure,
yeah.
for sure. It has more of a cost than it has a deck building cost at least.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a card that is me through and through. It's probably the one that I can point to most and say this is the card that I designed. I think the Ray Leader, I was very heavily involved with as well. She changed a lot through development, but is still a card that I'm proud of, and I think leads to like an interesting archetype.
Yeah. It seems like you're exploring more archetypes among aspects than we had in the past.
Yeah,
Was there a push to do that specifically?
I wouldn't say a push.
No, this
maybe
was
a
like
drive.
Yeah, it's something we wanted to do. I wanted to add a little bit more villain aggro because in the first few sets, villain was usually control and heroism was usually more aggro. So to flip that on its head, just to give players options.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I really like the heroism characters thematically, but I want to play something more rampy. And now you have Avar Chris. You can ramp up to her if you want.
Yeah.
Third Sister, I think, is a good control or a good aggro leader in villainy. And you get some great tools like the strike ship in the set. A lot of the Nile package can hit really hard, really fast.
There was also the drive to make control decks more unit centric.
Yes,
right.
yes.
This is something that we really wanted to bring to the front with Set 5 or with Legends of the Force. And so the Force package goes a long way because you pretty much need to have Force units to make those
to get the payoffs.
powerful events and units, pay out. And I think that helped us nudge control away from this sort of like, I'm going to lock you out, only play events. Now we want those events to be payoffs for playing the unit-centric game.
I respect that.
Danny has a very mean Kit Fisto control deck.
Oh, yeah.
That, I mean, it inherently requires attacks with units to function. So it's a mix of those control events like Shatterpoint, as well as getting a lot of little pings out with like Adigalia and then a Kit Fisto ping. And all of it blends together to make a control deck that does not feel that bad to play against, but it is quite strong.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're still interfacing with the core game loop of Star Wars Unlimited,
Yes.
which is play cards, play units, attack with units.
You're still interacting on the board. It's not just like, oh, play a card from my hand.
Exactly.
Your guy's dead. Play another card from my hand. Your other guy's dead.
Right.
And ad infinitum until you're out of cards.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the, like, I think for me, best things about Star Wars Unlimited is the back and forth actions, and those kinds of like Bosk Blue decks kind of don't really interact with that.
Exactly. And I've played a lot of that deck, and it's not really like, it's not fun to play against. It's not particularly fun to pilot. Relative to like a unit centric, where the board state matters and your sequencing matters a little bit more.
Totally.
I was a convert though.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I want hard control to be in this game, whatever.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believed it. And then through playtesting, through working with Joe, I really learned about the value of like focusing on the strengths of the game system. And then I became one of the real zealots about it, and now I'm like,
You're a complete convert.
absolutely. And so I still believe in like that control has a role in the meta. And of course share should change and, be liquid over the course of a rotation cycle and so on. But I do believe that leaning into the things that make Star Wars Unlimited great is the way to make those decks more fun.
Totally.
Awesome.
And Mill does not go towards those.
I agree.
Yeah.
So let's keep it that way.
Especially fatigue mill, where you're just trying to run your opponent out of stuff and take as long as you possibly can to do it.
One of my badges of pride is making Twilight of the Republic Satine.
Nice.
Mill half as many cards as she used to.
That's awesome.
I fought so many people on that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. All right. Well, I mean, is there anything else that you want people to know about Set 5, Legends of the Force?
It's a fun set, and I hope you have fun with it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Great chatting with you guys. As always, we love hanging out with you, talking with you. I think that's it.
That's it.
So
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Always good to chat with you guys.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll see you guys for some future sets. Are you guys designing any sets together in the future?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we are.
We are the same sinister minds that are going to bring Set 7.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So nothing revealed about that yet. But
Nope. Title hasn't been announced yet. Hopefully soon. But we're so proud of it.
yeah, no, it's fantastic. I love it so much. And this is where we kind of switched roles.
Yeah.
Like John was more of the lead and I was more of the support on that one. So
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, maybe we'll do this again before Set 7. We
I
can talk
think so.
about
Yeah,
Set
wait.
7 with you guys. So
Yeah, see you next year.
awesome. Yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody. Catch you guys on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.